I'm Max Keiser, and welcome to the Keiser Report. Markets, finance, scandal, more scandal. A lot of people are asking, is the financial crisis over? No, it's not over. It's merely mutated. I'll give you an example. Here's a story from Der Spiegel online. Short-selling American lives. That's right, short-selling American lives. How much are American lives worth these days? Well, according to Deutsche Bank Life Insurance Fund, they're worth something worth shorting. 2 Deutsche Bank funds were designed to profit from premature deaths in the U.S. by buying up life insurance policies. But investors have been seeing precious little return on their investments. Angry customers are accusing the bank of fraud and euthanasia. That's right, euthanasia for profit is Deutsche Bank's new product that they're trying to sell into this global Ponzi scheme, having destroyed the real estate market, the dot-com market, and all the other markets. Now they're into the life market. Speaking of life, I noticed that the crowds over there in America are rushing into the stores on Black Friday. No wonder they're selling these American lives short. Let's take a look at this video. Here they all are. Time to slap the pigs. Look at how the retailer is slapping the pigs. Yes, and Deutsche Bank hedge fund is selling these lives short. Well, I guess they got to make money somehow. Here's another way to gain precious cash flow positive positions on this trend toward malfunctioning economies and obesity. Apparently some Peruvian gang is kidnapping folks for their fat. Let's take a look at this report.
Police in Peru say they've broken up a band of assassins who say they were targeting people for their fat. Authorities say the gang members are killing people, draining their fat from their bodies, and then selling it on the black market for use in cosmetics. Police here can be searching the area where the victims are said to have been buried. Authorities say 2 of the suspects were caught carrying bottles of liquid fat, and one claimed it was worth as much as $60,000 a gallon. Still, medical experts are expressing doubt that such a black market really exists. They say that while human fat is used in anti-wrinkle treatments, there's no real need for a black market since it can be obtained easily and cheaply from those looking to slim down. Police have so far arrested 3 people and are searching for more, including the alleged buyer. Diane Kepley, The Associated Press.
That's right. Fat can be obtained from those looking to slim down. Let's take a look at the math, shall we? By some projections, 72 million Americans are now obese. Assuming that's 1 gallon of fat per obese American at $60,000 a gallon, that's $4.3 trillion that can be realized by obese Americans selling at least 1 gallon of fat into the black market. If you multiply that times 3 gallons of fat, which I'm sure will be easy enough to do within the next 5 or 10 years, that means that America, by simply selling its fat, could cover its entire national deficit in excess of $12 trillion. Fantastic. Deutsche Bank, how come you're not making a market on fat futures? How come you're not making a market on obesity futures? If you do, I want a commission. All right, let's see what else is happening in the big bad world. I bring in Stacy Herbert. Stacy, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Max, it's good to be here. I've got a headline: Goldman apologizes and offers $500 million to businesses. You see, the popular outrage during this financial crisis has really been focused on Goldman Sachs. So they've stepped in and offered $500 million. Now, they got big headlines from this, but if you look down a little bit past just the headline, actually, you find out that the $500 million is over 5 years. Half of it, almost half of it, goes to just scholarships, and the other half is dispersed via loans to small businesses. Now, to put this into context, you have to look at the following headline: small business loans, $10 billion evaporates. So Goldman's offering less than $100 million a year in loans when $10 billion has evaporated from the market. And you know, small businesses provide 70% of all jobs in America.
Jobs, schmobs. And that $500 million is collateralized by fat futures. Goldman Sachs and Warren Buffett's in on this also. It's a complete travesty. It's like when you go to a casino and you lose all your money and you get a free breakfast. And not only that, but we're going to be talking about this later on, I believe, and exploring it a little bit more. But I believe Goldman Sachs actually admitted culpability in the financial collapse.
Well, they did. The $500 million came only a day after Lloyd Blankfein apologized for the collapse.
Apologized for the collapse, Lloyd Blankfein?
And
that's and he's going to give away a few chips from the poker table? That's it? That's his penalty?
And you know that he did say, however, that they were doing God's work. Another thing that emerged this week in the Weekly Standard, which is a conservative publication in America, is they're encouraging Sarah Palin to run for the 2012 Republican nomination. And one of the writers in the Weekly Standard gave this as her possible slogan: "You shall not crucify mankind upon the cross of Goldman Sachs." So this is the sense of how big the populist rage is in America.
Goldman Sachs, by the way, has no gold. You know what's in Goldman Sachs? A lot of this stuff. Nothing. Look at that. That's Goldman Sachs' balance sheet. It's made out entirely of ersatz nothing. The stock's worth zero.
Well, this populist rage is spreading up beyond just Goldman Sachs. It's been kind of confined to there. Now, this week we also saw several senators, Republican and Democrat, and congresspeople calling for the firing of Timmy Geithner, as one of the headlines read.
Timmy's bad. He's a bad boy, Timmy Geithner. He was caught with his hands in the cookie jar, wasn't he?
Well, they're citing specifically that he had bailed out Goldman Sachs via the bailout of AIG.
Right. He did. He committed fraud.
So the populist outrage is forcing Goldman Sachs to act. Now we're seeing congresspeople calling for the firing of Timothy Geithner. And now the biggest fraudster of all is under attack, and that's the Federal Reserve Bank. The past week, we saw the passing of the Paul Grayson bill has passed the House Financial Services Committee.
Super. Standing by on the phone, Jane Hampshire of FireDogLake.com. You were instrumental in helping getting this bill through the Financial Services Committee.
The Federal Reserve has never by law been able to be audited in the United States, which is pretty crazy because the balance sheet of the Fed has expanded over $2 trillion in the past couple of years. And so nobody knows where all that money is going. And the state Federal Reserves that are in charge of sort of monitoring the Fed's activities have people on the board like Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan. So essentially, Congress and the government don't know what these quasi-private entities, private-public entities are doing, but the heads of the banks do. And that has, for obvious reasons, is a problem. So the Grayson-Paul bill, it's been Ron Paul's dream all of his life to be able to audit the Federal Reserve and show people what they were doing. And so it was a rather momentous event when this bill passed the committee.
Congressman David Scott had this quote: "This administration has been so overhanded, disproportionately leaning toward helping the top of the economic stream," end quote. Is this the popular rage that we're expecting to trickle up to the top?
The policy that the U.S. government has adopted recently has been let's bail out Wall Street at the expense of Main Street. And right now we're seeing 10% unemployment. I think a lot of people think it's time to start investing in jobs, in a serious jobs program in the way that China's doing, as opposed to bailing out the people who got us into this mess in the first place. And that tide is becoming very overwhelming and difficult for members of Congress to resist in either party. The situation I think that we're in is that they may decide to, for some procedural reason, not allow the vote to come to the floor. And they could do that. So that's what we're sort of going to be planning to obstruct any attempt to do that.
And finally, Jane, Congressman Barney Frank has voted against this bill. And he said the following, I can give you the quote: "It's going to be seen as weakening the independence of monetary policy with consequent negative implications." Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. The Fed is truly an independent operation. It's basically an arm of the Treasury right now that's run by the bankers. I think it's independent from the wrong people. I think that, there is nothing that will happen as a result of this that would be near as damaging as letting the people who are currently running the Fed continue to run it in the way that they're running it.
Thanks, Jane Hampshire of FireDogLake.com. Interesting.
That was. Actually, she mentions Jamie Dimon from J.P. Morgan. And, we previously had talked about a headline where everybody's calling for Geithner to be fired. This wraps up with a final headline, Dimon seen as successor to Geithner.
What? Jamie Dimon?
So they take one corrupt person and put in another one. You have no choice. All recourse is gone.
Jamie Dimon? Jamie Dimon? He's like the ace of clubs in the 52-pack playing card of financial terrorist. Alan Greenspan, ace of spades. Jamie Dimon, ace of clubs. They're going to... Oh, my... Well, hold that thought. We'll be right back right after this break.
Do you want to get a fuller picture? Don't miss it on RT and our website.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Still with me, Stacy Herbert. What else you got, Stacy?
Max, now we go from the trillions of dollars lost in Wall Street to the trillions of dollars lost in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because, there's been a similar lack of accountability and billions upon billions shoveled into just a small group of insiders. In this case, in Afghanistan, of course, they're connected to the military, the Department of Defense connections. In the case of the financial fiasco, the fraud, is those connected to the Treasury or the Federal Reserve, who have been given all sorts of funds with no sort of oversight. And the headline reads, Oversight of U.S. Aid to Afghanistan Sloppy. This is what the Inspector General, looking at the $40 billion that has gone into Afghanistan so far towards reconstruction, he said it's sloppy. They don't quite know what happened to it. In Iraq, you have U.S. fears Iraqis will not keep up rebuilt projects. Now, $53 billion has allegedly gone to reconstruction in Iraq. Now, the headlines, actual quotes within this Herald Tribune story, despite the $53 billion spent by the U.S., many Iraqis say that they don't actually see any of the work done. Ali Ghalib Baban, Iraq's Minister of Planning, says maybe they spent it, but Iraq doesn't feel it. Now, there's been zero oversight of this. And you and I know that from our contacts in Dubai, that they say that the Hawala, the money transfer system via Dubai, they said that, American contractors have been showing up since 2001, carrying suitcases with millions of dollars of brand new dollars and having it transferred back into the U.S. But none of the reports find anything. They only find it being sloppy.
Okay, so Congress approves money to go into Iraq. It shows up in cash, and U.S. folks put it in suitcases through the Hawala system, the local money-carrying system, back to the U.S. and back to their private bank accounts.
Exactly.
So it's like a slingshot. It's like a slingshot cash. It goes in, but it comes right back out. And the Iraqis are left with nothing.
And the Afghanis. So
Who
now,
wrote this? Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan? It sounds like what they do with these collateralized, slop-based, fat-based mortgage application bonds.
exactly, but there's no sort of popular outrage in America about this.
No.
So now, Obama is considering sending 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000 more troops to Afghanistan.
To handle the money laundering.
Well, we don't know.
What an incredible waste of money. Let's get more on this from Der Spiegel magazine. Ulrich Feitner, you've been writing about Afghanistan and you've been writing about AIG. Tell us, which is the bigger black hole?
Financially speaking, I guess it could be AIG, actually.
That's not true, is it? Because if you look at the dollars involved here, AIG was, an $80 billion collapse? Afghanistan's looking like a multi-trillion-dollar collapse. I would think Afghanistan.
Well, there's a fierce competition going on between the bailout banks and the diverse fronts of these wars. Yeah, maybe you're right. And that is exactly the problem when Obama is now trying to get a new plan, actually. because he's lacking the money he gave to the banks and that he would need maybe for his troops.
Yeah, apparently we can't do both. We can't support the bailout of Afghanistan and bail out the Christmas bonuses on Wall Street.
Well, I guess from my experience when I was traveling in Afghanistan last year and beginning of this year, I learned that everybody, all the allies, NATO, Americans, whoever you were talking to, was hoping for these elections to be a fresh start and to give a new hope to this country. Actually, as we have all learned, these elections were utterly flawed. It was a terrible mess. It was a fraudulent thing. And now we have not a fresh start, but a complete mess. So it's much worse than before. Hamid Karzai is an illegitimate leader, and here you are. And now you can't go around saying, well, actually, I know you're against the war, but come on, give yourself a push. Let's do something more for Afghanistan. That is impossible. So we're on the road downhill.
And tell us, what is the cost per soldier in Afghanistan?
Well, we've read some figures now as Obama is thinking about how to go on. You can roughly put $1 million per soldier as costs. So here you go. Right now we have 67,000 American soldiers on the ground in Afghanistan. Obama will add some. Nobody knows how many, but not so many. But yeah, roughly 1 million per soldier.
You know, I'm thinking of maybe Afghanistan is a reconstituted Arthur Andersen. Remember that accounting firm? They blew up Enron? Anyway, this Afghanistani territory appears to be where empires go to die.
I guess it is this terrible long history of wars and of occupation and of invasions and whatever that is really in a television show not to discuss because it's so extremely complicated. But that leads to a deadlock of a society that we can see now in Afghanistan, and with all these terrible, tiny little tribal groups, everybody's fighting everybody, and then that is very hard to, well, actually it's impossible to organize from the outside. That's it. And I guess you don't find situations like this a lot in the world. This is a very unique, very, messy situation.
What's the situation in Iraq now? Did the surge work?
Well, I tell you what, I tell you, that's a very, very striking thing. I've been to Afghanistan in January and I've been to Iraq in March. Now, when you compare the situations in Kabul and in Baghdad, I give you one example. In Baghdad, you find on the grounds of the old Al-Wiya club that is right beside the Palestine Hotel that we all know, the very famous Correspondence Hotel. There you can find young girls playing tennis in white clothes and, people sitting in the shadows of trees, having tea on Fridays. What's there, Sunday, as we know. And so on. So there is a lot of civil life going on, and there is, well, a decent social life that you can see now in total security. Maybe 5 minutes later and 2 blocks away, there's a bomb exploding. Yes, that is happening, and that's the situation in Iraq. It is a difficult situation, but it's not fragile, I'd say, overall, in general. You have big bombs, but you have little impact on the normal life of society, everyday life. In Afghanistan, the situation is completely different. I don't know. I don't see young girls playing tennis somewhere in Kabul. You won't have that. And the whole feeling of going through Kabul and strolling through Afghanistan is different because you have a population that is still in a direct post-war or war situation, and that is not comparable. Iraq, if you like, is on its way out, and Afghanistan is still in the middle of everything.
Baghdad sounds like Europe in the 1970s. Lots of bombs going off, but cafe life continued.
Yeah, well, it has to do with that. I mean, that you have to see that people cope with the normalcy they find. So Iraqis of today are not naive people going around and say, "Ooh, I can't live with any violence." No, I mean, they're used to violence. I mean, come on, let's face it. They live with violence since 10 years or whatever. And, 10 years, what do I say? 30 years with Saddam and his regime. So they're used to that. And everybody, I think, in the streets is seeing that there is a progress and there is a movement to a better future. That is obvious. While in Afghanistan, you don't have that. There is no progress. The only movement you have is downwards. It's a spiral that is really depressing. And I'm sorry not to give you any funny answers, but it is not very funny in Afghanistan, and I don't see any way out, actually.
So you're saying that Iraq is getting back to quote-unquote normal. Would a similar surge work in Afghanistan?
No, absolutely not, because and they know it, and they won't do it. That's what I tell you here. Let me give you a prophecy.
So you're saying they won't send more troops?
They won't send 40,000 or so troops. No way. They will send a symbolic figure, I don't know, like 10,000, 15,000, not to let loose phase General McChrystal. That's what they will do, but they will not plan a surge as they did in Iraq. The surge in Iraq came in a moment when the Sunni sheikhs in the Anbar desert were on the brink, when they had to decide, well, what do I do? How do I plan my future with my family? Will these guys stay, or will the other guys win? So they decided, with that surge and with that clear sign of persistence, if you like, they said, okay, let's try it with the Americans. Let's go with them. Let's do, let's see if we can do something with them. And they changed sides, and that changed the whole course of the thing. Now, in Afghanistan, there is no basis for a surge in that Iraqi sense, because the situation is so deteriorated that you have nothing to build on, and there are no groups to win over. That is the big difference. You still have a really hot and terrible and ugly war in the south, where combat troops are sort of, wasted, if you ask me, because they have no purpose and they have no real gain to achieve. And in the north, well, you have stabilizing forces, whatever, that are actually not necessary, maybe, in many parts of the country. So there is no basis for a surge, and I'm pretty sure that Obama knows exactly that. And he has this. Do you say cacophony in English? I don't know. This very contradictory advisors. Who the one says, "Come on, we need 40,000," and McChrystal would take 100,000 too. I mean, come on, he's a general. And on the other hand, you have ex-military men, like the new ambassador in Kabul, who says, "Jesus Christ, don't give them any troops. They will again use them for their terrible system of corruption." So
the argument that you hear in the UK and the US is that you can't retreat. But what I'm hearing that you're saying is that it's impossible to advance.
Well, that is, our discussions are always quite simplistic, aren't they? I mean, that retreat or not, more troops or not. I mean, it doesn't work like this. You have to see longer periods of time, and you have to see what can I achieve, what can't I. So in the case of Afghanistan, you have a complete mess. You have the Europeans who are unable to organize their interests and themselves. You have NATO on its first out-of-area engagement that is absolutely unable to build up any consistent action. You have the UN who always said, we are the champions of nation building and whatever. Now look at them. Have they built an Afghan nation in 8 years with all the security umbrella they had from the other allies? Now, you have the three biggest organizations in the world, plus the US, who are failing in their attempt to drive out at least the Taliban in 8 years' time. So, well, you can stay. Why not? But for what? For what reason? I mean, they have achieved nothing, and I think it would be wise to organize now a decent withdrawal and to hand back the destiny to the Afghans.
Thanks so much, Ulrich Feitner from Der Spiegel magazine. We're going to have to cut it off there. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report, and thank you, Stacy Herbert.
Thank you, Max.
And I want to thank Jane Hampshire from FireDogLake.com for also being on the show. By the way, if you want to get in touch with us, you can send us an email to max@KeiserReport.com. That's max@KeiserReport.com. Until next week, this is Max Keiser for the Keiser Report saying bye, y'all.